Hi, and welcome to Bloody Good Reads. I am your host, Mark Goddard. And this week's guest, we are going back into the world of extreme. You know I love extreme horror here on the podcast. So a listener warning at the start, there's going to be some stuff that we talk about here which might offend people. It doesn't offend myself, but we'll go into that one because Playground is got a few things I want to talk about with Aron on the podcast this week. But yes, this week's guest on the podcast is Aron Beauregard. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, Mark. Looking forward to talking about some horror. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, what we'd like to do here on Bloody Good Reads is force authors to pick 3 books they love because I am a bastard. But before we get to that point, and what I'd like to ask all my guests at the start of the podcast is how did you get into the horror genre? And more importantly, how do you get into the extreme horror genre? Because, your work is very kind of splatterpunk extreme. So.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like I'd always had what I call a morbid curiosity ever since I was a child. I don't know if it was maybe just seeing some influential horror films when I was younger. I did see like Pet Cemetery at a very young age, and actually, ironically, like The Stepfather Part 3. That one was kind of like definitely the worst one of the trilogy, but the first two are really good. But yeah, I think probably like also like Goosebumps books, stuff like that. Just like you know, children's books. That was a big thing too. I used to like to read with my nightlight on when I was a kid, and it was always I always wanted to, for the most part, do like spookier stuff. And I don't know, something just fascinated me about being a little bit scared. And I think when you're younger, it's easier to be scared with stuff like that, you know. So it feels so much more real, and I think it had a big impact on me. And that's kind of like where my love for horror started. As far as the more extreme stuff, I mean, I think when I was in my teenage years, I was finding a lot of a lot of those like Italian gore films on VHS and stuff like that, like Fulci and you know just like Torso. I remember I had that on, like a terrible movie, but it's got some good kills and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was just into like buying stuff that I had no idea what it was, but it looked like obscure horror. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean I'd always kind of been writing on and off when I was younger, but nothing super serious, but as I got a little bit older, um, I started when I met my wife. Actually, it was right around then I was showing her some like old screenplays that I had written, and she was kind of like, "Well, why'd you stop?" And I kind of had to think about it, and that kind of made me write this first novella I wrote, Die Tommy. And why extreme, I guess, is a tough question. I just always liked my horror more granular, not without story or substance or character arcs. Like all that stuff is very much critical and important. Um,
Like the Matt Shaw kind of way of it, because I know Matt Shaw is very kind of, as long as the story fits, it can be extreme kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. I just want the violence should usually mean something. I'm not
Mm.
going to say that every single story I've written earlier on in my career was maybe like that, but I think now it definitely is. And you learn a lot with any kind of writing. The more you do it, and you learn what works and what doesn't. And now I feel like I've really come into my own, and I'm in a good place when it comes to that. But yeah, that's why it's extreme for me. I don't know. I never liked boundaries. I always like to be able to pick up a book and say, or watch a movie and say, like,
Mm.
I have no idea where this is going to go, or it has the potential for anything. I think that's a cool feeling.
Okay. So, kind of reading styles. Do you read a lot of extreme as well as writing it as well? Or are you quite a big fan of the splatterpunk scene?
I honestly, I probably because I'm writing for, and this is an excuse, really. Excuse me, but because I've been writing for a living the last 2 years, it's like I've done so much with uh, um, text in general that it's like I'm so I'm looking at text all the time that I just haven't read as much as probably I should. So I'd probably say no. I don't read a ton. I've been trying to, get reads in on the road with audiobooks and things like that. Um, and while I do see a lot of like great talent, and I have read, excellent authors in the community, probably not anywhere near as much as I should have, if I'm being honest.
There's a lot out there, to be fair.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, before we get into kind of your work and where you started, again, what we like to do here in the podcast is force authors to pick 3 books that they love. So, what is your first bloody good read?
Yeah, I kind of did mine chronologically, I guess.
Yeah.
Just kind of as I grew up, and one that was really important to me was "Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark." I mean, it is a children's book, but I think it was really like I purposely omitted it from the intro so I could say it now, but I think it really had a huge impact on me as far as my love for just like the urban legends and how ghastly the illustrations in the book were. Um, it didn't, many of them didn't really feel like you were reading a children's book, even though they were kind of geared towards children.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, I just, that stuff really stuck with me. And I think that maybe my love for scary stories to tell in the dark is also why all my books are pretty much like the ones that I put out myself are illustrated as well. So, but I love urban legends. I love like taking. I think that's what makes good writing. Is what Scary Stories does, taking elements of reality and putting their own twist on them,
Mm.
and it's just something that it was a very '90s book. I feel like if you grew up in the '90s and you were in school around that time, these books they were everywhere and they're iconic. So I had to pick that as my first one.
Good pick. It's one that gets mentioned a lot on here, especially by the American authors. Didn't really have it over here during the 90s, sadly. But yeah, it's one that's a really popular pick. It's finally been picked as a bloody good read as well, which I'm very happy
Oh, good.
about. Awesome. So let's start off with how you started off with your work. So you're saying your first novella was Diatomy, which was what 2019?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I
So then,
I actually wrote it maybe even like a year and a half before that or so,
mm,
maybe a couple years before that, but I didn't have I didn't even know anything about publishing or submissions or anything like that until my wife got me like this self publishing book that was like an example of like what the book would look like. It
mm,
was just their packaging or whatever, but um, so yeah, I mean, it wasn't my book. It was just like their sample product essentially. But I was like, man, that's really cool. Like they would print that, and kind of from there, I ended up publishing Try the New Candy first, but then I had
mm,
that one kind of waiting, so I moved on to that one next. Yeah, but I did write it
cool.
first, if that makes sense.
Cool. Get quite a few. You've got quite a few out in such a short amount of time on here as well. So I mean, you had like Scary Bastard come out the same year, and then you had a brilliant year, 2020, with The Slob, which I've spoken to many people, and The Slob is quite a popular one among the splatterpunk kind of community. So yeah, it must be quite good to get such a great reaction out of a book, which is I have been told very gory and very gruesome. So,
Yeah, I learned a lot. I mean, that the crazy part is that was the third book that I wrote, The Slob,
okay.
which is like I ended up re-releasing it. Actually, I re-released all of my first 4 books with new covers in my second year of publishing, and then also like better editing and things like that. I was kind of clueless early on, as many people
Mm,
are, and but yeah, it was weird on that re-release of The Slav. It really took off. I think the cover definitely had something to do with it, and then
mm-hmm,
that kind of gained the intrigue, and then it's the sort of book people either love it or they absolutely hate it,
mm,
which is fine, and it's fair. If you pay for a book, you get to give your opinion on it. I don't get heard about any of that stuff, but I think the things that I've seen as to why people were most drawn into it again, and that's where I learned a lot about character. People liked that character Vera in the story so much that when things happened to her and when she got hurt, they felt it because they really either identified with the character or at least felt for it. So yeah, so
I find that a lot with Playground, which we'll go into a little bit later, but the character work in that book is just amazing. And you do feel, even for the asshole parents who really shouldn't have kids,
yeah.
but just a general feel, you can feel the pain and you can feel the horror in that room, especially in spoiler alert, because I might spoil some bits, so sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
But the kind of the watching room scene where one of the parents dies right at the start of the book, you can feel that shit, things are going to go they ain't going to go my way kind of thing in the room. So I like that about your work. I want to go back and read more of your stuff because that Playground is my first one of yours. So, but we'll go into that later.
Well,
But,
thank you for reading it, though. I do appreciate it.
no, I'm loving it. But I will praise it as much as I can by the end of the podcast. But your second year, big year, would be Yellow as well. I know Yellow was quite a popular hit.
Yeah, that one took a little longer to um, hit, because I was still learning things about the release process at that time and like really like learning how to promote myself and like what makes a good release. I wasn't even doing hardcover releases at that time. So, you know, um, when it when there were some reviews shared about Yellow on TikTok, it did end up catching fire a bit and then got a nice push for sure. And that one, honestly, that's probably the most violent thing I've written. I think
Mm.
it's a mix of crime, noir, and horror. Really, it's a revenge tale. Um, and I was always a big fan of those sort of over the top action movies, like the Charles Bronson Death Wish movies, things like that,
Mm.
that are just ridiculous. Like his family is like raped and killed in every single Death Wish movie. It's like the same thing happening over. It's like, but I don't know. I like that stuff. And Yellow was a bit more like, it was darker and more horror related, but it found its audience. And I hope to write some more of that kind of like crime horror element, gritty street stuff. I love
Mm.
that stuff.
It's a thin line, crime and horror. It's because we cover a lot of crime on here as well, but you can class a lot of it in the same genres.
Yeah, and it's weird. It's like sometimes horror readers do not want to read crime at all either.
Mm.
But I was very fortunate to not really experience that because of, you know, adding some horror elements, but it still very much feels like a crime book at some points, I think.
Mm.
So it's weird. It's a thing you kind of when you're mixing genres, but it's been a great experience for me so far. So I'm hoping to do more.
Mm. Cool. I know you've done a lot of collaborations as well, especially with somebody I class is quite high up in the old kind of extreme. It's Matt Shaw. I know you got the Girl in the Cellar just recently came out, which is on my next to read list because I like both your works. I really want to get reading that. It's a great series of books, the U-turn books. But was you the first one that he approached for that one? That's the
For
first book in the series, isn't it?
Oh yes, for Girl in the Cellar, yeah. So Matt and I
Yeah.
had yeah, Matt's a great writer. He's been doing this a long time and he's doing his film stuff now too. So I'm happy to see, all his success. But yeah, I had pitched an idea for a book called Survivor's Guilt to him. That was last year. Well, actually,
Mm.
I'm sorry, probably the year before that even actually.
Yeah.
But it was released last year in March, and then most recently, as you said, The Girl in the Cellar, which was like part of the U-turn series, where it's two authors telling one story, but he'll take the first half of the book, and then the second half I take, and it's like it snaps and pivots completely. It's like a complete U-turn, not what you would expect the story to go, not the direction you would expect the story to go, and that's kind of the idea behind it. Like we use From Dusk Till Dawn as an example. It's like this is a crime movie for the first 45 minutes, and then suddenly vampires. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, that idea put into uh, novellas with two authors working together. But yeah, it was fun to do. I had a great time doing it.
So do you get like pretty much full reign on each half of your books? So you get like a rough idea of the storyline, but between the two of you, you both kind of got free reign. It's hard to tell because I know a lot of collaborations. It's very hard to tell kind of who's writing what. So you're two different styles. Yeah, confusing.
Yeah, the way we break it up, it's not a secret. You know what I mean? It's like part one, and then it's Matt, and he writes that first part. But yeah, then you'll see like part two is written by me. So it's very much divided so that the reader's aware. Yes, this is going to be a different experience. A different experience. The writing is not designed to mesh.
Okay.
It's kind of something I did with Daniel Volpe as well. Like we released a book called "So Sorry," and while it doesn't the story doesn't pivot in a U-turn fashion like it does for the Matt, but like I did with the one with Matt, but with "So Sorry," it's like perspectives. Like I would write the first part of the book, and it's completely from this character's perspective, and then Dan in writing the second half, there are characters that you think are just sort of in the background of that first story, but then they're actually the prominent character in his story. And so in sort of dividing the story that way, you can actually it's not really jarring to the reader, you know what I mean, because it's a different writing style, writing about different characters. So you don't have to like mesh it together like you would a novel or something like that. So I like writing those type of projects, and actually I'm doing another one with Dan that we're going to be announcing. It's already pretty much done. We're going to be announcing it probably by mid-year.
Cool. It's a good idea, and I think again the U-turn series seems to be expanding out as well to different kind of extreme authors as well. But no, I'm looking forward to something with you and Daniel Volpe. We've had him on the Battle podcast before. He's a brilliant writer, so looking forward to reading that one as well. Cool. So before we get on to your two books from last year, what is your second bloody good read?
My second one, I'm going to pick American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis.
Good choice.
Just because this book, when you talk about extreme, I mean, it's in the fiction and literature section, but it's just like, I didn't know that people like authors wrote like that really until I read that. I didn't know that it got that granular and extreme. And I think when you see someone else doing that, getting to that level, it kind of can unlock things for you. And when I read that in high school, it did. I had a teacher. I think I was talking about the movie with him, and then he was like, that's a book too, and the book is absolutely insane. They wouldn't be able to do the stuff in it in the movie, so you should read it. And I did. And again, I select that one because, like Scary Stories, it just had a huge impact on me, and not just the violence of it, but sort of the glamour and snideness of that world that Ellis creates, and just the people that are so self-absorbed. Um, it's just an interesting kind of world to read about.
Cool. And our second time being picked in Bloody Good Reads, so it's a popular pick, that one. Awesome. So let's get on to your latest book, a Splatterpunk nominated book, which hopefully you'll do quite well with once the awards are on. Playground. Now, it's one I've been listening to on audio. Very good audible version as well. The lady who narrates it is amazing. And I'm very fussy with audiobooks, but it is such a messed up thing. I class it as Saw with children. So if anybody wants to get a rough idea of kind of the plot, but where did the idea for this book come about? That's the intriguing bit.
Oh, it's pretty funny actually. Like, I was just driving in the car with my wife, and we drove by a playground and we both looked at it, and then I don't. We might not have even driven by a playground when it happened. Actually, she might have just said this randomly, but she was like, just can you imagine if there was like a playground that was just like intentionally dangerous, like the most dangerous playground?" And I was like, "Yes, yes, I can." I was like, "That sounds insane." Like, and we were at first we were talking about just like, oh, like a playground, and at the end of it, there's like a cliff, like right at the end
Mm.
of it, it's like a kid could just fall off, and that's kind of, I incorporated that into some areas of the playground, just this like pitfall to utter blackness, that just
Hmm.
it would be so terrifying for an adult, let alone a kid. But yeah, it was something as stupid as that. And originally I was just supposed to it was going to be a short story. I needed a short story to put into a collection with some prior works that I was getting ready to re-release. um, but the more I wrote it, I was just like, this just isn't a short story. And it turned out to it what I thought would be just a simple short story turned out to be the longest thing I've ever written. And I felt something with this one when I wrote it. Like,
Mm.
I was like, it made me emotional at the end, which doesn't happen really. And I was like, man, I really hope that carries over to the readers. And
Mm.
that's why I like wanted to invest in Lila, to to really get a great narrator. And she had done The Slob and Son of the Slob, and while there's more of a financial investment for someone like that, when you believe in something, you've got to do it. And it
Hmm.
was clearly the right thing, because I mean, just the audio, not even talking about the other formats, just audio alone has nearly sold 1,000 copies. It's been out for just a couple months, really. So
Mm.
um, it's gone really well, and yeah, that's where the idea came from, though.
It's such a great book, and again, spending that kind of investment out on her, it's a good choice. I mean, I'm, like I said, extremely fussy with audiobooks. Um, breathers, I like to call them. You get a lot of kind of audio readers who are very breathy, and it kind of takes me out of the story where she's quite fluid. Um, and the kind of the young voices, man and female, even the kind of the parents' voices. The only other one I've really kind of compare it to is Head for the Ghosts, the Paul Tremblay book. That was another one that was extremely well kind of read on
Oh,
audio. So
well, that's a great comparison. Thanks. And
and
I think, yeah, I think like she actually took some voice classes for um, to do like young male voices. It just so
mm,
happened she had taken those like right before I told her about the project. I was like, man, what amazing timing. And she was very excited, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we put something like that in the sample, so that people knew, there's going to be a lot of child acting in this, in case that's
mm.
not their thing. You know what I mean? Because I could see how that might not be for everyone. So yeah, I think the way we approached it and how we released it really made it successful. In that, I mean, and not to mention, I mean, obviously it's been doing tremendous in paperback,
Mm.
ebook, and hardcover too. So I'm very, very happy with it.
And she's got to have a very strong stomach reading some of the stuff in this book. So yes, let's go into the book.
Yeah.
So um, again, I absolutely love this book. I haven't finished it, annoyingly, because I want to read the rest of it now. Because now we've spoken, I have a bit more of a relaxed time with the book. So, um, yeah, just from start to kind of where I am now, the kind of set in the feeling of it. It's you can taste in a way some bits, and I think you know which bit I'm talking about. Um, Yeah, and the kind of mirror dildo wall, and yeah, stuff like that, which kind of turns your stomach. But the story behind it and the pain you feel with these kids. There's a scene, again, spoiler, a little bit of spoilers, but I haven't got too far into the book. One of the kids are trying to escape, but the ceiling's coming down, and she's gonna be crushed, and that kind of feeling between, do I leave her here or do I save the others? And that actually made me quite like made my chest tighten. It's the thing that I get from your work, it's a lot of emotion, and you do feel it. So I don't get to say that very often with many books. So,
Oh well,
but
thank
it
you.
has done really well.
Yeah, I think those emotional elements are really important in writing, because if a character dies and nobody cares about them, it's just like, it's definitely a letdown. And
Mm.
so you gotta that was the whole thing. I was like, man, if this is a short story, I'm just like mutilating kids, and that's really all it is. But it was so
Mm.
much more than that. And it's really a story about teamwork too. I think and like
Mm.
dealing with adversity and fighting through difficult situations.
Yeah.
And
You feel them grow as people, as kids. You feel them mature throughout this experience. They have to really, but yeah.
yeah, and it's funny. Like I had a reader, I think, put something up on a review, something similar. Like they were like, "Oh, if when we were kids, we did a lot of growing up on the playground, but the growing up that these kids have to do is like very literal, kind of,
Mm.
you know."
Awesome. So, for people who haven't read the book yet, can you tell our listeners a little bit about the book, without spoiling too much?
Sure. So Playground is about three low-income families that are approached by a gentleman on the playground, and these are like, I would say families that are a little bit more impoverished and desperate. Not to say that they're all innocent. They all have their own things going on, as any family does. But at the end of the day, they're offered a sizable sum of money for the time period of the 90s that it takes place in, just to simply have their children come to this cliffside estate, near the ocean, and play on what they are told is an ultra modern playground. This philanthropist, Geraldine Borden, is creating a playground that she is telling them that she wants to release and donate to the public eventually, but she wants to make sure that children are going to enjoy it. But obviously, things aren't what they seem, and you know, she's not telling the whole truth. And yeah, I think that's probably leave it at there. They got to come together and kind of band together against this evil and try to
Mm.
get out of there. Try to get out of her playground.
Yeah, and don't want to spoil too much, so we'll won't go too much into more detail. I think I thought a couple of bits, but I do apologise.
That's
But yes,
okay.
that is Playground. That is out now. That is up as a nomination for the Splatterpunk Awards, which will showcase a bit more nearer the time what books are on that one. But it is one of the high regarding books on there. A lot of people are pushing for Playground. It's really been doing so well. So go and pick up a copy now on Audible or over on paperback as well. Head over to Aaron's website as well, because there's some amazing stuff on there, some signed editions. So go and check that out on his website as well. A bit of a plug for the merch. Cool.
Oh
So
yeah, and if in case anybody's wondering, my website is just my initials. It's abhorror.com. abhorror.com.
which we'll put in the description below as well.
Thanks.
So need to ask the last bit. What is your third and final Belly Good read?
My third and final one. This one I was probably maybe late to the party on it, but I read Clive Barker's Books of Blood while I was working at the bank before I had started writing full time. Um, and we would have time in between phone calls, so I was just short stories are perfect for that kind of thing. Um, so I was reading that, and I think one of the things that stood out to me with those books were just like his imagination. It was uncommon to say the least, one of a kind. Um, I think he's like the ultimate artist almost, because he's done like I have a piece of his original art in my office too, and he's just done everything: video games, comic books, movies, scripts, like literally, he's a painter, a drawer, like almost any art form you can think of, he's done it, and he's done it well. And obviously, I'm a fan of his more, he's considered one of the OGs of splatterpunk in a way.
Hmm.
Um, so he's just incredible. And anybody who is thinking about writing too, I would say listen to the podcasts that are there with him as well. He's just amazing. And these stories, I mean, God, several of them have been made into films now. But the Midnight Meat Train, everybody loves that one. In the Cities, in the Hills, I love that story particularly. It just when you talk about imagination, um, that story is just insane. Like the imagery that he'll put into your brain if you read that story. So it had a huge impact on me, and yeah, I mean, it's probably a reason why I did start trying to write short stories myself.
Brilliant choice. And man, I'd love to get on the podcast, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
He was on Mick Garris's postmortem podcast,
Mm,
maybe like within a year or so. I know he's been kind of ill
mm.
though, unfortunately, but
Yeah, I've had people connected to him on the podcast, but not really heard great stuff about his health. So unfortunately, he's one of the authors who I would love to get on, but ill health. It doesn't help the situation. But
yeah.
awesome, three brilliant picks. Again, a brilliant brand new book coming out, and uh, an amazing back catalogue as well. So yeah, last thing I'm going to ask you then is, have you got anything in the works coming up this year, and anything you can talk about?
Yeah, I have a 3-book series that I'm going to be releasing next. That's called,
Okay.
as I talked about, one of the things I thought I was born with was a morbid curiosity. And this series is called Aron Beauregard's Morbid Curiosities, and there's 3 different stories that are kind of interconnected, but
Hmm.
they can still be read independently. But if you read them together, you'll get sort of the full picture. And yeah, it's the first series I've done, so I'm really excited to do it. I've always been a huge fan of like Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, things like that. So
Hmm.
imagine that sort of a vibe with if you like my extreme writing styles. Um, it's going to kind of be a combination of something like that, and I'm super excited. And I definitely have several other projects that I can't really talk about yet,
Hmm.
but it's going to be a massive year for me as far as releases go. But yeah, that's what's next on the plate, the 3-book series, and I'll be selling limited hardcover collections of it via my website, abhorror.com. And then I will have the paperbacks and ebooks for wide distribution on Amazon.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week. Again, check out Playground. I'm loving it. It's one of my favourite ones for the year so far. If I read it last year, it would have been one of my top ones from last year. So go and check it out. Where can people find you if you'd like to be found?
Yeah, I'm actually like very approachable as far as social media presence goes. You can always contact me through the contact form at abhorror.com. But if you see me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, um, you know, I'm always on those platforms. I'm on TikTok as well. Um, and I do have like a mailing list that you can subscribe to as well. And you could always reach out to me that way too, which is my Substack. So just Aron Beauregard Substack. You can find me there as well.
Awesome. Again, thank you to Aaron for coming on the podcast this week. And again, go pick up Playground and go and visit AB Horror as well. Again, all the links to the social medias and the website are in the link. All the links to the social media and the website are in the links below. And yeah, go and check it out. As always, a huge shout out to our sponsor, Abominable Book Club. They're the UK's best horror and thriller book box service, bringing the wonders of a haunted bookshop straight to your door each month. We just had the recent book box come through last weekend. So we had a copy of Justin Robertson's The Tangle, Andy Davison's The Hollow Kind, and we also had a second-hand book and a load of amazing chocolate and bag and everything inside the books as well. If you'd like to get a little bit of money off your first box, use the code BloodyGoodReads at checkout. They'll be going in for the April box by the time this podcast comes out. March already been done. Unfortunately, you have missed the amazing signed edition of the new Eric LaRocca book. Do apologise, but go and check out the April book box. You get some amazing books in there, and use the code BloodyGoodReads at checkout. That's at Bottomwood Book Club at CreateTrade.com. You can catch me over on Twitter at BloodyGoodReads. You can catch me over on Instagram at BloodyGoodReads, and you can even come and see the new, I say new website. The website has been a bit more refurbed. So go to www.bloodygoodreads.co.uk to check out film reviews, book reviews, features. We have a new feature where each month we'll let you know what kind of new books coming out for the month coming up. So we've just got a piece on there for Tor and Tor Nightfire and what amazing books they've got coming out for March. But yeah, go and check it out. And yeah, give us a message over on the social medias. Go and give us a 5-star review over on the podcast app of your choice. And as always, I've been your host, Mike Goddard. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.